There were 18 candles on my birthday cake. The name piped across the top wasn't mine. That same night, my parents handed my brother the keys to a brand new truck, and they handed me a lecture about responsibility. It had 3 parts. I counted. I smiled through all of it, because in our house, a daughter who smiled was furniture, and furniture doesn't cause scenes. Before sunrise, I was gone. One gray hoodie, $60, and a bus ticket out of my own life. 2 weeks later, my dad called me in tears. "Please," he said, "just come home." It took me 7 years to learn what those tears were really for. When I finally did, I drove back to that town with a folder in my passenger seat, and I ended a story 3 generations older than me. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women finally say the things families pretend not to hear. My name is Gabrielle. I'm 31, and I work nights in an emergency room in Columbus, Ohio. If you've ever been the one who did everything and was seen for none of it, this story is yours too. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight, and be sure to subscribe, because you'll want to hear how this ends. People ask why a nurse keeps receipts for everything. Grocery runs, parking stubs, a text from 2019. I tell them it's a work habit. That's half true. The whole truth starts in Harlan Falls, Ohio, population 4,000 and change, 2 stoplights, one church with good pie and long memories. On Main Street, between the pharmacy and the barber shop, stood a brick building with gold letters on the window. Brennan and Son Hardware. Established 1954. My great-grandfather painted those letters before my father was born. Notice anything about them? The sign never said daughter. It never said family. It said son. Singular, like a law of nature, and the whole town read it that way without ever thinking about it. My grandfather ran that store. Then my father, Dale Brennan, ran it. My little brother Cody was going to run it someday, and everyone knew that before Cody could walk. Me? I stocked its shelves for free every summer of my childhood. I priced washers and cut keys and swept the same oak floor my father swept at my age. I knew that store like a first language. In that store, I learned to count everything: inventory, hours, the number of times my name got said out loud in a day. Small numbers mostly. I didn't know it yet, but counting would save my life later. Here's what the pattern looked like up close. I was 10, standing on a milk crate in the back room, sticker gun in hand, pricing 3 cases of drawer pulls. Cody was 8, sitting on the counter next to the register, eating a push pop, while Dad showed him how the drawer opened. "He's learning the business," Dad said. I asked if I could learn the register too. Dad didn't even look up. "You're doing fine where you are." The chore chart on our refrigerator had one name on it. Mine. Dishes, laundry, Saturday inventory. Cody's chores were listed as helping Dad, which meant riding along to the lumberyard and getting a hot dog on the way back. Mom kept the books for the store, unpaid. 30 years. You'd think she'd have noticed the math of that. Instead, she enforced it. "Gabby, your brother needs the quiet to do his homework. Gabby, take the small bedroom. Cody needs space for his weights." I want to be fair here, so I'll say it plainly. Nobody hit me, nobody starved me. What they did was quieter and slower, and it took me years to find the word for it. One afternoon when I was 12, a customer asked my father if his kids would take over the store someday. Dad clapped Cody on the shoulder and said, "My boy's gonna run this place." Then he nodded at me, at the mop in my hands. "The girl? She's good help." The customer laughed. Dad laughed. I kept mopping. Good help. I was the help. Senior year, I found the thing I wanted. A hospital field trip, a nurse named Rosa who let me watch her start an IV, and that was it. I came home glowing and said the word nursing at dinner. I had the brochure from Marion Tech. Prerequisites, then the nursing program. I'd done the math on notepaper. I could cover half with waitressing if they helped with the rest. Dad let me finish. Then he wiped his mouth and gave me the speech I could recite in my sleep. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Gabrielle. This family doesn't hand out free rides." Cody was 16 and had never worked a shift anywhere. That same month, I saw Dad and Mom at the kitchen table with a man from Kessler's Auto Group, all of them smiling over paperwork. When I walked in, Mom flipped the folder shut like I'd caught her stealing. I figured it was store business. I want you to remember that folder. And remember this too. That spring, an envelope came addressed to me. My full name, Gabrielle R. Brennan, from a bank in Columbus I'd never heard of. 17 years old, I stood in the kitchen turning it over, and I asked Mom what it was. She took it out of my hands, easy as taking a knife from a toddler. Junk mail, honey. They send those to everybody. Then she tucked it in her apron pocket and started talking about the weather. I noticed. I asked. I got an answer built to end the conversation. Remember that envelope, it comes back. June 14th, 2013. I turned 18 on a Friday, 2 weeks after my high school graduation. I got up early and baked a coffee cake for the family, because that was the tradition. I baked on birthdays, including mine. My graduation cap still sat on the counter, tassel hanging off the sugar jar. Nobody had moved it. Nobody had framed anything. Mom came down, kissed the air near my head, and said the sentence that fooled me. Big dinner tonight, sweetheart. Whole family's coming. Wear something nice. I stood there with flour on my hands and let myself hope. That's the part that still embarrasses me, more than anything that came after. 18 years of evidence, and I still thought maybe this once, the table was set for me. I even ironed a dress. Around noon, the phone rang, and it was Grandma Ruth, my father's mother, the only person in that family who said my name like it meant somebody. She'd owned the building the store sat in since Grandpa died, a detail nobody thought about except her. She didn't sing happy birthday. She said, "You're 18 today. That number matters more than they think." Her voice had something in it I couldn't place, like she was standing between me and weather I couldn't see yet. "Whatever happens tonight," she said, "call me after." I laughed and asked what could possibly happen at a birthday dinner. She didn't laugh back. The relatives came at 6. Aunts, uncles, my cousin twice removed, who only showed up for food. There was a strange energy in the driveway, people grinning at each other over my head, and a shape out front under a blue tarp that everyone pretended not to see. I pretended too. We ate. Then Dad stood, tapped his glass, and said, "Before we do cake, we've got something special." He walked us all out to the driveway and pulled the tarp off a brand new Silverado, dealer sticker still in the window, and tossed the keys to my 16-year-old brother. Cody screamed. He actually screamed. Everyone clapped. Dad put his arm around him and gave the longest speech I'd heard him give in years, about the Brennan name, about the store, about how a man needs a truck he can count on. "This family invests in its future," he said. On my birthday, I stood on the porch steps with my ironed dress and applauded my brother's truck. Then Mom carried out the cake, white frosting with blue trim, 18 candles already lit. She set it down in front of both of us, and that's when I read the icing. "Congratulations, Cody," in perfect bakery cursive. Mom caught me looking and smiled the way you smile at a slow child. "One cake covers both occasions, Gabby. Don't be dramatic." The candles were for me. The cake was for him. I laughed along with everyone so I wouldn't cry, and I blew out my candles on my brother's cake. After the cake, Dad found me by the porch rail. I thought, here it comes, the part where he remembers. He put his hand on my shoulder, heavy as a sandbag, and said, "Now that you're 18, we need to talk about responsibility." That was my gift. A lecture, delivered in 3 movements while my brother revved his new engine in the background. Part 1. Responsibility. A Brennan pulls her weight, and now that school was done, I'd be pulling full days at the store. Part 2. Gratitude. Everything I had this family gave me, and a grateful girl doesn't ask for handouts. That one was aimed at the nursing brochure, which had disappeared from my room. Part 3. Family. Family means nobody's. 3. Family. Family means nobody's keeping score, Gabrielle. He said that with a straight face, at a party where the scoreboard was parked in the driveway with a bow on it. Mom stood beside him, nodding on the beat, like a metronome in a cardigan. And then, as he turned to go, my father added one more thing, casual, almost to himself. Monday morning, you'll come by First Harlan with me. Now you're 18, there's grown-up paperwork to square away. Bank stuff. He patted my cheek. Twice, gently, the way you'd pat something that belonged to you. Through the kitchen window, I could see Cody watching us. 16 years old, keys in his fist. My brother looked away first. That was new. He'd never had trouble looking at me before, and some animal part of me filed it under things that are wrong here. Bank stuff. Keep that phrase where you can reach it. The party wound down by 10. I carried plates while everyone hugged Cody goodbye. Then I washed dishes for 40 people by myself, and I watched 2/3 of my brother's cake sit under plastic wrap on the counter, my candle holes still in it like little graves. Something in me had gone very quiet. People think decisions like mine are made in an explosion. Mine was made over a sink, in yellow rubber gloves, with my mother's good china in my hands. I dried the last plate. I hung the gloves. Upstairs, I moved like I was packing for a sleepover. One gray hoodie, 2 changes of clothes in my school backpack. My documents: birth certificate, social security card, diploma. Because even at 18, I was the one who knew which drawer those lived in. And the roll of tip money I'd hidden inside a tampon box for 2 years, the one place nobody in that house would ever look. $60. I'd had more in the spring. The prom dress Mom insisted on, for Cody's sake, had eaten the rest. A story for another night. I stood in my doorway and looked at the room that had never really been mine, the smallest one, the one Cody didn't want. I didn't leave a note. A note is for people who will wonder. At 4 in the morning, I walked out the kitchen door, past the truck with its ribbon drooping in the dew, and down Route 9 to the Marathon station where the Greyhound stopped. The 5:40 bus to Columbus cost $28. I paid it and didn't look out the window. Columbus at 7 in the morning is loud and completely uninterested in you, which turned out to be exactly what I needed. I had $32, a backpack, and a list forming in my head. Shelter, work, ID, in that order, on a napkin, before fear could get a vote. I spent the first night in the bus station pretending to wait for a bus, spine against a wall, backpack strap wrapped twice around my wrist. Don't let anyone romance that to you. It was frightening, and it smelled like bleach. And I'd do it again before I'd go back. In the morning, a woman at an information desk looked at me for a long second and slid a flyer across the counter. A drop-in center on 4th Street. The drop-in center led to a youth shelter that took 18 to 21s, a bunk, a locker, a caseworker named Miss Petty, who talked like a drill sergeant and kept butterscotch in her desk. On day 3, I used the payphone and called the only number I'd brought on paper. Grandma Ruth picked up on the second ring, like she'd been sitting by it. "I'm safe," I said. "I'm in the city. Don't tell them where." I could hear her breathing, steady as a clock. "I won't," she said. Then, before she hung up, my grandmother said the thing I'd carry like a coin in my pocket for the next decade. "For the record, child, you should have had your own cake. It sounds small. Stand where I was standing, 20 cents poorer, and it was the first time in 18 years anyone had put it on the record at all." By the end of that week, I had a job. Earl's Half Moon Diner off Livingston Avenue, dish pit to start. Earl was 60, built like a mailbox, and hired me because I showed up at 6 a.m. 2 days in a row without being asked. Within a month, he had me waitressing the counter. The work was hot water and burned forearms and quarters counted into a coffee can, and I want to be honest, I was good at it, because I'd been trained my whole childhood to serve people and stay invisible while doing it. Turns out that's a marketable skill. The other waitress on weekends was Tanya Ruiz, 20, loud, generous, studying for her GED on the milk crates out back. She heard where I was sleeping and said her cousin's building had a room, split rent, no questions except one. "You gonna be boring about the dishes in the sink?" First friend I ever chose. Meanwhile, 90 miles up the road, here's what was happening in my parents' house. And I know this because my grandmother told me later, dry as toast. Nobody noticed I was gone until Sunday afternoon. 2 full days. They thought I was sulking in my room, and the theory survived that long because the chores were the only thing that missed me, and Mom assumed I was doing them quietly. When they finally opened my door and found the bed made and the closet thin, my mother's first call wasn't to the police. It was to my grandmother, and her first question wasn't whether I was alive. It was, "Did she say anything about Monday?" 14 days after my birthday, my phone lit up on the diner counter. Dad. I stood in the kitchen doorway at the half moon with the phone buzzing in my palm, and Earl looked over and said, "Take it or don't, but the coffee's burning." I took it, and my father, a man I had never once heard cry, not in 18 years, was crying. "Gabby." His voice came apart on my name. "Please, just come home. Your mother's sick over this. We did wrong by you, sweetheart. I know it. Please, just come home." Sweetheart. 18 years and I could count the endearments on one hand, and here they came, pouring out like the jackpot on a slot machine. And God help me, it was working. My eyes went hot. My mouth opened. Somewhere in my chest, the 8-year-old who used to sit on the stairs hoping to be called down was already packing. I heard myself start to say, "Okay." And then, underneath his crying, I heard my mother's voice in the background. Low, impatient, the voice she used when a customer was taking too long at the register. She didn't know I could hear her. "Just get her home first. The paperwork can wait till she's here." The paperwork can wait till she's here. My father kept crying into the phone, and I stood there listening to both channels at once, the grief on top and the logistics underneath. "Gabby? You still there, baby?" I looked at the phone the way you'd look at something moving in your peripheral vision. Then I hung up, wiped my hands on my apron, and refilled 4 coffees down the counter without spilling a drop. That night, my grandmother texted me one line, "Don't come back for them. If you ever come back for you." I gave myself one night to fall apart about that phone call. One. I sat on the fire escape of Tanya's cousin's building with a gas station iced tea and cried until the streetlights blurred, and then I was done, the way you're done with a shift. The next morning, I flipped over a half-moon napkin and wrote a plan on it with Earl's counterpen. CNA course first, cheapest ticket into a hospital. Then prerequisites at Columbus State, 1 class at a time, paid in cash. Then the nursing program. Then RN. I gave it 7 years, and I taped that napkin inside my locker at the shelter, and later inside every apartment cabinet I ever had. Sundays became the architecture of my week. Every Sunday at 4, my grandmother called, and we traded our weeks like ration cards. Her hip, my tips, the pie situation at First Methodist. She never once asked when I was coming home. She asked better questions, like what a catheter was, and whether Earl paid overtime. Here's the thing I noticed, though, and I want you to notice it with me. After that first tearful call, my father never called again. Not on my 19th birthday. Not at Christmas. A man cries down the phone like his chest is caving in, begs his daughter to come home, and then 2 weeks of silence, then a year of it. Tears that urgent don't just evaporate, unless they were never attached to me in the first place. It would be 7 years before I found out what they were attached to. Believe me, we're getting there. Now, the part nobody warns runaways about. I marched into the financial aid office at Columbus State that fall, 18 and employed, and feeling extremely adult. And a nice woman explained that as far as the federal government was concerned, I didn't exist without my parents. Under 24, unmarried, no kids. Then the aid forms need your parents' tax information, she said. Their signatures, their cooperation. But I don't live with them. I support myself. She'd heard it 100 times. There was a hardship override, she said, but it needed documentation. Abuse reports, letters from clergy, a paper trail. My childhood had been very careful not to leave one. Nobody files a police report about a chore chart. So I called the house. Mom answered, sugar-voiced, and when I asked for a copy of their tax forms for the aid application, the sugar cooked into something harder. Well, that's family financial information, Gabby. You walked out on this family, remember? Doors swing both ways. Click. There are many ways to keep a daughter. Paper is the cheapest. So I paid retail for my own future. One class a semester at first, cash at the bursar's window. Anatomy flashcards taped over the dish sprayer while I worked doubles. Do the math on a waitress funding college at market price and you'll understand why it took the years it took. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because I need you to know exactly how much every single credit hour cost me, because of what I found out later about where my money had been going all along. While I was pricing out my future by the credit hour, back home a different version of me was being manufactured. My grandmother saw it up close. At First Methodist, at the Rotary Pancake Breakfast, in the checkout line at the IGA, my mother told the town what happened to her daughter, and what happened, in her telling, was a boy. Gabby ran off with some boyfriend from the city. Broke our hearts. We pray she comes to her senses. Sometimes there was a shrug that did more work than the words. Wild girl. Ungrateful. You do everything for them, and this is what you get. The town nodded along because my parents were Main Street and I was a girl who'd left, and a small town always believes the person who stayed. My grandmother mailed me a clipping that spring, the church bulletin's prayer list. Please pray for the Brennan family, and for Gabrielle, wherever she has wandered. Wandered. Like I was livestock that slipped a fence. I stood at the mailbox reading it, and Tanya read it over my shoulder and said, "They put it in the church paper?" and whistled low. Here's what I did about the town's version of me. Nothing. I want you to remember that too, because it becomes a theme. I never once called anyone in Harlan Falls to argue. You cannot out-talk people who own the microphone. My grandmother knew it better than anyone. Let them have the story, she told me that Sunday. Stories wear out. Paper doesn't. I didn't understand yet that she was telling me the family strategy. Theirs, and eventually mine. I passed the CNA exam at 19 and got hired onto a med-surg floor at Riverside Nights, the shift nobody wants, and I loved on site. The charge nurse was a broad-shouldered woman named Lorraine Okafor, 20 years in, reading glasses on a beaded chain, the kind of nurse doctors argued with exactly once. My first week, she watched me help a patient to the bathroom, chat with him, settle him back, and move on to the next room. She pulled me aside with 2 fingers. "Where's that in the chart?" I said he'd only needed a hand. It wasn't a big deal. Lorraine took off her glasses, which I'd learn was her way of clearing a space in the world for a sentence that mattered. "Listen to me, baby girl. If it's not written down, it never happened. Not in this building. Chart it, or it's a rumor." Something went through me when she said it that I couldn't have explained at the time. I wrote the note. And then I never stopped writing. It became the spine of how I nursed. Chart everything. Timestamp everything. Assume someday a stranger will need to reconstruct this night from your words alone. And quietly, without deciding to, I started running my life the same way. Pay stubs in a folder. Rent receipts in a shoebox. That church bulletin, filed. My grandmother's letters, filed. $60 had taught me to count. Lorraine taught me the other half. If it's not written down, it never happened. Hold on to that sentence. It's the hinge this whole story turns on. Lorraine's rule kept me alive in more ways than one. If you've ever had to write things down just to prove to yourself they happened, the slights, the debts, the unfairness nobody else would name, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And subscribe, because what my parents had been doing with my name all those years, you'll want to hear that part with your own ears. By 20, I had a small life that was entirely mine, and I was proud of it in a fierce, low-grade way. CNA wages plus diner weekends, 2 classes a semester now, a napkin plan on schedule. Tanya and I decided to graduate from her cousin's building to a real two-bedroom in Whitehall. Dishwasher, parking, a tree outside the window. We toured it twice. We budgeted it to the dollar. We filled out the application at the leasing office with the ceremony of two women signing a treaty, and the manager ran our checks while we waited. And I watched his face do something complicated at his screen. He asked Tanya to give us a minute. "Miss Brennan, we can't approve you as a leaseholder. There's a credit issue." I told him politely that there had to be a mix-up. I was 20. I had no credit card, no car loan, nothing. I'd never even had a visa. I paid cash for everything, which I'd always thought of as a virtue. He turned the monitor a few degrees toward me, not all the way people do when the news is bad but not technically theirs to deliver. "Ma'am, this report shows accounts going back years, collections activity, charge-offs." He squinted at the screen, then at me, then said the sentence that split my life into a before and an after. "You've got a whole adult's credit history here. You said you're 20? That night, I sat cross-legged on Tanya's floor and pulled my credit report. All 3 bureaus, the free ones you're entitled to. My hands already knew before the rest of me caught up. They were doing the thing they do before a code, going calm and cold and precise. The reports loaded. 4 accounts, 2 credit cards, a store card, and a personal line of credit at First Harlan Bank. The bank on Main Street. The one with the lollipops. The one where my father had wanted to take me that Monday. Combined balance, with interest and late fees, $23,400. The oldest account was opened in October 2011. I was 16 years old in October 2011. I sat there doing the arithmetic of my own childhood. The billing address on every account was my parents' house. The mailing address was my parents' house. That envelope when I was 17. My full name. A bank I'd never heard of. Junk mail. Honey. I thought about every lecture my father had ever given me about money. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Gabrielle," delivered while my name was out working for him at 22% interest. "This family doesn't hand out free rides." No, it took them. And then the last puzzle piece slid in so quietly I heard it click. Monday morning, First Harlan. Grown-up paperwork. Get her home first. The paperwork can wait till she's here. They hadn't wanted their daughter back. They'd wanted the signature that would turn their crime into my debt. Tanya found me at 2 a.m. still on the floor. "Gabby, whose accounts are those?" I heard my own voice answer from somewhere across the room. "Mine, apparently. I've been very generous." The next day, I called the fraud department at First Harlan on my lunch break, sitting in my car with a legal pad on the steering wheel, because by then I took notes the way other people breathe. The woman who picked up had the voice of someone who has heard everything twice. I explained. Accounts in my name, opened when I was a minor at a bank I'd never walked into as a customer. She didn't gasp. That told me plenty. "Ma'am, was your social security number available to a parent or guardian?" I said yes. Date of birth listed on the application may have been altered. Lenders don't verify age against the card. She walked me through it like a recipe she knew by heart. To dispute the debt as fraud, I'd need a police report and a federal identity theft affidavit. On that affidavit, there's a line where you name the person who used your identity, and you sign it under penalty of perjury. "Most young people in your situation never file," she said, and for the first time her voice dropped its uniform. "You want to know why?" I said I thought I could guess. "Because in cases like yours, honey, the name that goes on that line is usually a parent." I sat in the parking lot watching heat come off the asphalt. I asked the question I already knew the answer to. What happens if I don't file? Papers shuffled softly, 90 miles away. Then legally, the debt is yours. All of it. $23,400 or my father's name on a federal form. Pick one, Gabby. There's no door number 3. I called the house that Sunday, after my grandmother's call, so I'd have something steady in my ear first. Mom answered. I kept it clinical. I'd seen my credit report. I knew about the 4 accounts. I knew the oldest one was opened when I was 16. There was a pause with a whole cathedral of silence in it, and then my mother, never raising her voice, that was always her genius, did a lazy loop of the classics. I was confused. Banks make errors. And if there were accounts, well, households share expenses. And hadn't I lived under that roof rent-free for 18 years? Rent-free. I heard a rustle, and then my father's voice took the phone, and there was no confusion in it at all. He didn't ask what accounts. He didn't say, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Family money is family money, Gabrielle." Slow and patient, like he was teaching me to read. "You'd have wasted it on yourself anyway," he said. "Some overpriced school. At least it went to something that lasts." Something that lasts. I looked out my window at the parking lot and understood we were talking about a truck. I told him what the bank told me. Police report, affidavit, a line for a name. The patience went out of him like a plug pulled. "You file that report," my father said, "and you have no family, you hear me? None. Not a mother, not a brother, not a Christmas. Nothing. You'll be no daughter of ours." I thanked him for his time. It's the waitress in me. Then I sat with the dead phone in my lap and thought, there it is at last, out loud and on the table. The price tag. They'd finally told me exactly what our relationship was worth. 23-4. The following Saturday, my grandmother rode 90 miles on a church van to see me, 78 years old, in her good coat, carrying a Tupperware of apple pie like it was a diplomatic pouch. Tanya gave up her chair and hovered. Grandma Ruth listened to the whole thing, the report, the numbers, the affidavit, the ultimatum, with her hands folded, and here is what shook me. She never once looked surprised. Angry? Yes. Her mouth went to a thin line I recognized from my own mirror. But surprised? No. And when I finished, she looked out the window for a while and said quietly, "Your father learned this somewhere, child." I asked her what that meant. She shook her head once, the way she did at rummage sales when the price was wrong. "Not yet. That's a story you're not strong enough to carry while you're still deciding. I'll tell you when it helps you instead of breaks you." Then she opened her pocketbook and put $200 on my table, worn 20s, bank teller neat. I pushed it back. She pushed it back at me with one finger, final as a gavel. "It's not charity, Gabrielle, it's back pay." She stood to catch her van, buttoned her coat, and at the door she turned around. "Whatever you decide about that paper, you file it or you don't for you. Not for them, and not against them. For the record of you." I keep her exact words because I wrote them down that night. By then, you understand, I wrote everything down. I printed the affidavit and it lived on my kitchen counter for 3 weeks like a diagnosis I wouldn't read. Some nights I filled out the easy boxes, name, address, the account numbers I now knew by heart. Then I'd get to the line, name of the person who used your information. I wrote Dale Brennan once, in pencil, and erased it so hard the paper went thin. You want to know what stalls a person at that line? It isn't love, exactly. It's the resume of hope. Sign it. And I wasn't just reporting a crime. I was closing the file on the family I kept believing would someday show up for me. The 8-year-old on the stairs doesn't retire quietly. Meanwhile, the debt sat on my name like a lien on my whole future. No apartment, no car loan, and the fraud woman had confirmed it. No student loans for the nursing program either. Their theft was compounding, in every sense. What finally moved my hand was a patient, an 81-year-old man, end stage, awake at 4 a.m. the way they get, who held my wrist while I checked his line and told me about the brother who'd cheated him out of a farm in 1974. 40-plus years, and his voice still shook. "I kept waiting for him to make it right on his own," he said. "Honey, don't you wait on people to see you. Waiting is how they win." He died that Thursday. I went home Friday morning, still in scrubs, and picked up the pen, and this time I asked the bank for one more thing first, the complete statements. Every account, every transaction, from the beginning. If I was going to sign, I wanted to know exactly what I was signing about. The statements came in a fat envelope, and I read them at the kitchen table with a highlighter, the way Lorraine had taught me to read a chart, front to back, no skimming, initial every page. It was the biography of a theft. Groceries in 2012. The dentist Cody saw for his wisdom teeth. Christmas at a sporting goods store. Sized extra large, which is not my size. My name, 16 years old, quietly co-signing a household from inside a tampon box economy where I hid my own tips. And then I turned to June 2013 and found line 41. Cash advance, $4,800. June 11th, 2013. Kessler's Auto Group. 3 days before my 18th birthday. I put the highlighter down. I remember the refrigerator hum got very loud. June 11th. The folder that snapped shut when I walked into the kitchen. June 14th. The tarp. The keys. The speech about investing in the future. My brother screaming with joy in the driveway. The down payment on Cody's truck came off a card carrying my name. I didn't just get forgotten on my 18th birthday. I financed it. The lecture about responsibility was delivered to the person already paying for the party. I sat very still for a long time, and something remarkable happened. My hands stopped shaking. All the grief I'd been dragging around finally set, like a fracture setting into something clean and load-bearing. I printed that page separately. I folded it in quarters, and it went in my wallet behind my nursing badge, and I want you to know it is in my wallet tonight, 11 years later, soft as cloth at the creases. Some people carry photographs. I carry line 41. Monday morning, I drove to the police substation on the east side, before my shift. In the rain, because if I waited for a sunny day, I'd wait forever. A detective named Ramos took me to a desk with a coffee ring on it and read my folder in the unhurried way of a man who has seen every kind of family there is. "You understand this? Name's your father," he said. Not a warning. A door held open so I could look all the way through it before walking. I said I understood. He slid the affidavit across, and I put my name on the line under penalty of perjury, and this is the part I didn't expect. My signature came out steady. Steadier than it looks on my mortgage now. Then Detective Ramos said, "Anything else you want in the file?" And I heard Lorraine in my head, glasses coming off. If it's not written down, it never happened. So I gave him the whole record. The envelope at 17. Monday morning bank stuff. The phone call. The paperwork can wait till she's here. Line 41, unfolded from my wallet already. He typed it all. 2 fingers, no expression, and at the end he printed the report and put the case number at the top, and I copied that number into my notebook like a vital sign. Walking to my car, I waited to feel triumphant. What I felt was the specific quiet of a hospital room after a machine gets switched off. Somewhere in that rain, the last version of me that could ever go quietly home died on the table. Nobody called a time. I just drove to work and clocked in. The bank's fraud unit notified the account holders. That's procedure. I learned a lot about procedure that year, the way you learn a language by moving to the country. The response from Harlan Falls arrived within a week, in layers. First, a voicemail from my mother that started in her church voice. "Gabby, sweetheart, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." And curdled, by the end, into something I only played once. The word ungrateful appeared. The word vindictive. The phrase after everything we sacrificed, which remains my favorite sentence my mother has ever said, for its engineering alone. Then a text from Cody, 18 by then. "Why are you doing this to Dad? He's not sleeping. Whatever they took will pay you back someday, just drop it." I sat with that message a long time. I typed out 11 different replies over a week, long ones, short ones, one that was just a photo of line 41. I never sent any of them. What do you tell the boy who got the truck? He wasn't lying. He genuinely didn't know the whole of it. Not knowing was his whole job in that family, and they'd trained him for it since birth. Same as they'd trained me for mine. Detective Ramos called once that month. The county attorney wasn't inclined to prosecute an intra-family case if the victim wasn't pushing, he said. Was I pushing? I looked out the break room window for a while. "I want my name back," I told him. "I don't need his head." Some of you will disagree with that call. I understand. But the affidavit stood, notarized, permanent, and the blocks went onto the accounts. And a paper I'd signed in the rain started slowly to work, too.